Hello everyone, it's Jenny Fitterer and I am here with your Gemini season forecast. So in today's video, as always, we're going to be going through some of the astrology that's going to be happening this season, and then we'll be doing a single tarot card reading for the collective. If my eyes are going over to the side here, that's where my notes are, and we're just going to dive right in. So for this season, Gemini season, it's running from May 21st until June 21st, so ending at the June solstice. And so the sun is moving into Gemini on May 21st, and the concepts of Gemini that the sun is going to be illuminating is, I get really excited about Gemini season because I'm a Gemini moon. So Gemini is an air sign, and it's a mutable air sign. So it's the most flexible, the most expansive sign, and qualities of Gemini is very much this light, airy quality that really wants to move around and does not want to stay in one space. So Gemini season, there's this feeling of like excited energy and this desire to expand and a desire to kind of move from thing to thing to thing. There's an energy of curiosity, and Gemini is very interested in learning new things. Not necessarily interested in following that learning through to mastery, but really getting on that beginner's mindset and being curious. I want to know about this. Well, now I want to know about this. Well, this has made me question about this. So Gemini has this really deep-seated curiosity that they're always wanting to bounce and fill and feed. So in this season, there's much more of an interest in that kind of learning and playful energy. Gemini is also very kind of playful and comedic, and often very like kind of sarcastic, and has a lot of the like kind of trickster energy of kind of joking around and saying, you know, things can be this way, but then maybe it's actually kind of this way, and kind of pulling jokes and being kind of witty in that regard, and that kind of follows with the kind of light, playful energy. Gemini is not particularly interested in things staying very serious, and so often in this season, if you find that you like things to be very like serious or stoic, then either you might get a little light injection, or you might find this season a little bit difficult, as other people maybe don't take things as seriously as you might want to. But it's a really great time to kind of lean into that, to think, okay, especially after the very grounded, solid, stubborn Taurus energy, Gemini brings like a little bit more fun and a little bit like, you don't need to work so hard. You don't need to take yourself so seriously. Let's just kind of kick back and enjoy things. Gemini is also very much into communication, very interested in talking, verbal connection. That's very part of the curious part and the learning aspect of Gemini, is wanting to know things about other people and engage in a very verbal, vocal kind of way. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is the planet of thought and communication. So this extra focus on wanting to talk and maybe also being kind of like the social butterfly, where you want to talk over here and then over here. So this season there tends to be kind of an opening up of this desire for social connection, and kind of opening up the social network that you might have, and that can bring a lot of kind of new ideas and answers to some curious questions as well that come up. So those are some of the aspects of Gemini that will be kind of heightened as the sun moves into Gemini. We're still going to have a lot of planets in Taurus. So even though the sun's moving into Gemini, there's going to still be some of that kind of heavier grounding energy. So overall, we're going to have, it's not just all jumping into this air sign right away. There'll be a bit of a balance. So you can kind of picture it like, I kind of think of it like a balloon that's still tied to the ground. So it's like, oh, it can go up here and blow in the wind, but it's not so and more that it's going to blow away. It's still got a bit of grounded element. So that's sort of what we're feeling with sun moving into Gemini. The next planet that we have is Venus, who has been in Cancer, is going to be moving into Leo. So this is going to be a really interesting combo with the Gemini season. So Venus is the planet of relationships, love, and relationships is not just romantic relationships, it's any of the ways in which we connect intimately or connect with another being. It also has a lot to do with our relationships to money. This has a lot to do with our values. So the energy that we put into building a relationship with our values and with the people around us has a lot to do with Venus, as well as the things that just give us pleasure and like kind of make us feel warm and pleasured and soothed. So Venus moving into Leo is a very forward-facing fire sign. Leo is the kind of proud lion and also the sort of sovereign ruler, like the energy of the king or the queen. So Leo is generally about being center stage, being seen, often being admired as well. Leo really, really enjoys not just to be praised for no reason. Leo really enjoys to step up and either as kind of a leader, as an icon, or an influencer, and an inspiration. And what is inspiring about them is the light that they bring. So Leo doesn't just show up and expect praise. Leo brings forth something creatively expressed. So whether that's like a fine arts artistic expression, whether it is leadership qualities, it's just something to do with, hey, I have something to give and present. I would like you to watch me, notice me, pay attention to what I am showing and bringing to you, and then hopefully give me a little bit of accolades and admiration as well. So Venus, being this planet of relationships and also pleasure, is we're going to feel a lot more pleasure and desire to show and express our creativity and to receive feedback, positive feedback from it. So there might be, this may have been a time where you might have been working on something on your own, or you might have something that you kind of maybe have been working on or is artistic or important to you, or something that you really want to step out and you haven't really felt like doing it before. With Venus entering Leo, suddenly there's going to be this like, yeah, I can take center stage. Yeah, I really want to be seen for this. And that's also going to be apparent in our relationships as well. So this might be, say, in our romantic relationships, we may sort of actually really be looking for feedback, positive reinforcement from our lovers and friends that we matter, that our art matters, that they take us seriously and that they admire us. So this is a good time to, if you desire that affirmation, to ask for it and to really feel nourished and fed by it. The dark side of Leo can be being a bit of that attention hog, or really, really needing that affirmation and feeling like there's a lack without it. So there can that be that search for affirmation from an external source without being grounded in that positive confidence yourself. So ideally, the ideal pattern of Leo is that Leo has so much confidence on the inside that they radiate it out, and other people feel that confident energy, feel inspired by it, and then feed back affirmation to the Leo. But the Leo already has that confidence in themselves, so it becomes a really healthy reciprocal loop. The downside is if Leo doesn't have that confidence already internally, then they're seeking and hungering it from other people. And so what they're doing then is more about, I need you to praise me. I'm only doing this in order to get something from you. I want your praise. And it's that kind of, can become that insecure loop. And so that's what we want to avoid. We want to think about finding that confidence in ourselves first and in our relationships first. And then it is good to seek feedback and still want some positive affirmation from others, but it comes from a grounded place rather than a like, I'm gonna starve without it and I'm nothing without it. So that's going to be June 5th is when Venus moves into Leo, and we'll be getting some of that kind of razzle dazzle that Leo brings. So as I mentioned, since the sun's moving into Gemini and we're already feeling this like a bit more social energy, a bit more connection, then when this Leo energy comes in as well, it's going to be like this increased social audience and then this desire to shine in the center stage. So this is going to be a really interesting season for anybody that's wanting to be doing more leadership, or even marketing, or just wanting to take a little bit more of a center stage in their relationships and social groups, and really wanting to kind of be seen and be connecting with people. This is like a really, really nice time for that. So that's Venus entering Leo on the June 5th. Next we have, I'll just touch on it briefly, Pluto, who has already gone retrograde. Pluto is retrograding backwards into the sign of Aquarius. So Pluto had been, into the sign of Capricorn. So Pluto had been in Capricorn for a while. Earlier in the year, Pluto was going direct, came into Aquarius, and then last season, Pluto went backwards again, but was still in Aquarius, and now he's just on his way retrograde, is crossing back into Capricorn. So Pluto as this planet of large sweeping transformation, and often transformation comes with a dying of the old to turn over to make room for the new. And Pluto is a very far out planet. They're the furthest in the solar system. And so the effects of Pluto is often felt on more of like a like a global scale or national scale or kind of larger shaping kind of the sweeps of history. It does have an impact personally as well, but we kind of notice it more kind of in the larger world. So Pluto moving back into Capricorn is going to be kind of taking a little bit more of a look at Capricorn themes, which have to do a lot with structure, government, especially the sort of, in our current iteration, the sort of patriarchal top-down kind of hierarchy, as well how we do focus on work and productivity. Those are all Capricorn issues. And so Pluto in retrograde moving back into Capricorn is going to be reminding us like, hey, we have over the last like quite a few years have been like shaking up and seeing the structures, the old structures, the patriarchal structures, the government, the focusing on the workaholic like capitalist rush. That has been like, we took a look at it. That's been shaken up a lot, including with COVID and changing a lot of how we were able to work or not work. Those themes, it's not necessarily that we're going to fully jump into them the same way, but we are revisiting like, hey, Pluto reminds you that we're doing change. Don't think that we've forgotten you. Don't think that just because you maybe weathered like, maybe it'll pass. Maybe Pluto will move on from us. Pluto says, don't forget the lessons we learned. Don't forget that these concepts need to change. We do still need to look at transforming out of the old Capricorn structures, money-focused, hustle culture sorts of things. That's not necessarily healthy. We need to find the new way to go through it, and this retrograde moving back into Capricorn is just going to be a reminder. So we might be seeing it in a larger scale, but you can also look at those concepts yourself. Okay, what came up for you in terms of how do you kind of find your place and structure in our systems? Do you feel comfortable with that? How do you find your relationship to being the sort of provider energy and having to make money and work to survive, especially in this day and age? Most people have to be the provider as well. A lot of the time we've moved out of the single breadwinner income for a family, and a lot of times most of us have to have a job. So we're all kind of in this Capricorn energy of needing to work to provide for ourselves and for others. What does that look like? What is this retrograde is there gonna bring anything up for you to examine? Had you been thinking about changing some of your work structures, or like you might get another injection of that this season? So just some kind of things to think about. Pluto can operate very subtly in our personal lives and sometimes not so subtly in the world, but it's a slower moving energy. So it's not necessarily like, oh, you're gonna notice the impact right away. It is a long-term process. So these are things just to like be aware of, but they're not necessarily all going to come to fruition right away. On the date that Pluto moves back into Capricorn, that date is June 11th. So Pluto retrograding back into Capricorn June 11th. Then pretty much immediately after, the same day on June 11th, Mercury is going to be entering into Gemini, joining the Sun in Gemini. So Mercury is the closest planet, or the tightest, closest to the Sun in our solar system. So Mercury is very, very fast. And as I mentioned before, Mercury is the planet of thought, communication, travel, and Mercury rules Gemini. So Mercury going into Gemini right now is going to be it's going to be a very home sign, very familiar. So Mercury loves being in Gemini. So our communication gets a lot of, our communication, our desire to think and learn is going to be pivoted to Gemini issues. So things like curiosity, asking questions, wanting to learn new things, wanting to connect with others socially as well. So we're going to kind of have that double whammy where we're going to be thinking and wanting to act in these ways, and our mind is going to be very curious and wanting to adventure. One of the things that happens with Gemini is Gemini is seeking stimulation, mental stimulation, and excitement, which means they can often get very bored. A part of the thing that can happen with Gemini is this desire to jump from thing to thing to thing can become like craving, like that dopamine fix of I need the next hit, I need the next hit. The second I feel boredom, I'm not going to push through that. I'm not going to learn patience. I'm just going to move to the next thing. So that can be great. There's a lot of benefit that can come from kind of moving on and not being entrenched in one thing and trying a lot of new things. But that can become this addictive cycle of impatience and this desire to overcome boredom because of like a difficulty sitting with that. So just be aware of that. Again, you don't have to like force yourself to stay on one task, but think rather than how can I avoid boredom and how can I not be so bored here and search like a quick thrill. Think more about how can I move towards something that delights me, or what am I curious about that I can learn about? What do I really want to be doing right now? And it might include moving around or trying new things, but it comes from the place of desiring to fulfill a desire instead of this like running away from boredom, which can be that kind of endless cycle. So on the plus side, though, Mercury in Gemini, we often get a little injection of maybe a little bit more loquaciousness as a word, or a desire to, and also a skill in speaking a little bit more. And whereas sometimes, Mercury in Taurus is a lot more thoughtful, much slower to speak, and is really working through and processing ideas. And now Mercury in Gemini is like, I'm really ready to share. I want to share and communicate those and speak those. So it can be a really, if you've been kind of struggling to find your voice, or having a not really feeling like sharing things that you've been wanting to, then Mercury in Gemini is like, no, I got to get it out. So this stacking with this Venus in Leo in Gemini season really bodes well for any sort of public speaking, or any sort of being in the spotlight and wanting to communicate ideas and wanting to learn and engage with things as well. There's a lot of things that are lining up really nicely for that. The downside can be speaking before you think. So Mercury and Gemini can be known as talking all the time, not a lot of substance, a lot of talk, but all full of air. So and sometimes that's fine. We don't have to be serious all the time. That is one of the really, really nice gifts of Gemini season, is it doesn't always have to matter. Sometimes the things we do are just things, and we can stress about them so much, or we can do something embarrassing and we think that somebody's going to be thinking about us forever and judging us. And maybe they've forgotten, not everything we do has the most massive, long, impacting sort of issue that we have to stress about. We can kind of just be like, oh well, Gemini's a bit of the jokester and the trickster, well, that was silly. Oh, being a little foolish. And also offering that grace to yourself and to others as well. Being able to laugh at ourselves, then not take things quite so seriously, can really just kind of grease a lot of our relationships and have them be flowing a little bit faster. Because when you don't take yourself too seriously, other people can be at ease around you, because they know and can be confident that you're not going to be too reactive, which means they're allowed to make mistakes. It's really, really restful for another person to know that they can make mistakes and that they're not going to be totally bludgeoned or be taken too seriously. And when they know that they can relax and there's not going to be so much of a penalty, then often being in that relaxed state allows them to make fewer mistakes anyway, because we make more mistakes under stress. So that applies to others and us as well. So it's this mirror where I take myself less seriously and I don't need to be so defensive, which allows me to feel relaxed, which in turn allows other people to, be able to be in a humor and take things less seriously too. And then just, you can feel that mood in the room when somebody makes a joke or something silly happens, and the air just lightens, maybe there was some heavy feeling, and it just feels like everything's going to be okay. So Gemini really says, you know what, everything's going to be okay. Just calm down, just have a laugh. And that's a really nice kind of energy to bring with us. So Mercury and Gemini, we're going to be chatting up a storm, having a great time, learning lots of things. And that'll be starting in June 11th. Then the last transit that I'll be talking about, other than the moon dates, is going to be Saturn is going to be going retrograde in Pisces on June 17th. So Saturn is this planet of structure and discipline, and the way that when we discipline ourselves and narrow our focus and apply limitations to ourselves, that those limitations can focus our energy in a way to achieve and manifest a lot more. So Saturn is this planet of manifestation and mastery that comes from limitation and focus. So Saturn often feels not so fun because we don't really like limitation. We want everything to be available to us. We want things to come to us easily, and we don't necessarily want to work too hard. But very rarely do we ever really accomplish things that are lasting or meaningful when we just kind of go about it in a haphazard way. So Saturn really invites us to focus and say, okay, we can't be partying every night if we want to get this work done, or we're never going to be able to be mastering this skill and get to the point where we want to be if we don't really rein it in and focus. So the energy of Saturn is tightening and focusing and fixing. But Saturn has been in Pisces for a little while, just a little while, and Pisces is this planet of kind of an opposite energy from Saturn. Saturn's very focused and very serious, and Pisces is very expansive. It's this water sign. It's deeply empathetic, deeply emotional. It's very, very connected to everyone around us and the world at large, and specifically Pisces feels like it has no borders. Pisces is this feeling of the dissolving of the walls between you and me so that we all sort of recognize our kind of core similar identity. So Pisces is all about dissolving into oneness, and Saturn is all about defining and bringing in structure. So that can feel a little like difficult, but also this can kind of soften each other, like kind of bring into a middle ground, where Saturn being in Pisces can feel a little bit more relaxed, or not so much relaxed, but warm. Saturn is like, okay, yes, we're bringing in structure, but it's really from a place of heart and from a place of empathy and from a way that we will better be able to serve everybody's needs and achieve a greater open consciousness if we just kind of focus and do our homework for a little bit. And whereas Pisces can get lost in the void of like, oh my God, who am I? I'm so emotional. I can feel everything that's happening. Saturn bringing a little bit of restriction and some boundaries in might really balance that out. So there's this, tension of opposites, where opposites can either be like, oh, we don't feel comfortable together, or they can pull together and say, oh, there's a middle ground between us. So that's Saturn in Pisces in general, but now Saturn is going retrograde. So anytime a planet goes retrograde, the focus, the energy becomes, rather than an outward directed force, it becomes more about an inward focused slowing down, restructuring. So for example, for Saturn, if Saturn is about like limitation and focus and manifesting, when it's going direct, it might be a time where we're really applying our energy outward, or we're really, really working seriously and noticing some changes, and like we're setting our habits, and we're making our plans and setting our goals in order to, like setting our time that we're going to practice our skills that we're working on, and very forward energy. Saturn going in Pisces might say, I really need to take a look at these habits and really, maybe I was just copying those habits from someone else, but I need to see, does this really apply to me? What's the end goal here? Is this even in alignment with what I'm looking for? Pisces is also a very spiritual sign, is very connected to kind of the etheric realms. So whatever that might look like for your belief system, whether that's being in prayer and being in connection with a deity that's relevant to you, whether that's just feeling into the energies of the universe or the world, or listening to your dream space. Pisces is very engaged in the spiritual and sort of that icon energy of the oracle. So what that might look like is Saturn going in retrograde and asking for a bit more reflection of what we need to reorganize and restructure on our path to mastery, using those more spiritual practices, because a lot of spiritual practices really, really focus on the inward. They really look at that slowing down inward reflection, really feeling like the Saturn retrograde is encouraging you to lean into your spiritual practices, lean into those lines of questioning to say, hey, it's not just about what do I need to do thinking here, or what's the recipe that somebody else has for me in order to succeed at what I want. It's really leaning into that kind of spiritual core, and whatever your practices might be, whether it's meditation, whether it's prayer, whether it's wanting to learn a different kind of spiritual practice, whatever it is, that's going to lean really, really well into this period of retrograde, when it is connected to that vision of what you're wanting to manifest. So it is still focused. It's not just, I just kind of want to do spiritual stuff because I feel like it. It's like that is connected to your vision and connected to that which you're trying to improve on. And really, because Saturn brings that focus and limitation, this will be a really good time to build those habits. Like if you're looking for a meditation practice, schedule it. Get really clear on restricting yourself, and you're not just going to lean into the Gemini desire to, which will be very strong right now, to just, I'm gonna go do this, I'm gonna go play, I'm not gonna do that right now, I'll do that prayer later, I'll do that session later. That tension, Gemini is going to be having its like, let's have fun, and Saturn's still like, yes, have fun, but don't forget that our limitation to build towards mastery is what is going to allow us a greater sense of freedom later. So that, it's a little bit of not instant gratification towards the long run. So, but then Gemini does get to bring in the injection of, yes, we are focusing. We want to get serious on our visions here, but you don't have to take it too seriously. You don't need to beat yourself over the head if you don't maintain these habits all the time. Good enough is good enough. As long as you're improving, that's really helpful. So Gemini is going to remind us that you don't need to be all doom and gloom, especially when we start talking about Pluto and Saturn. People can start to freak out and get so serious or get really stressed out. Gemini's like, look, no matter what happens, we're going to ride it out. We can always find the humor in a situation. So I think that I love Gemini season personally. So this is, just an interesting combo with Saturn going retrograde. Will hopefully be a bit of that ballast. And this season, as I said, we do still have a bunch of planets in Taurus. Jupiter's in Taurus, and Mercury's going to be in Taurus for a little bit of it. And the North Node's in Taurus. So I'm not talking about that in this episode, in this session, but there is still that ballast. So there's some Taurus energy, and then there's this sort of Saturn, more focused retrograde energy too, that's kind of holding some groundwork here. And then we get to kind of play in the Gemini field without totally floating away and throwing away all of our progress on everything, or just, Gemini season can be a major time to feel like, I'm bored. I want to blow up everything that I was working on because I just want adventure and freedom, which feels good for a little bit. And then you come back and you're like, oh, I let a lot of things go because I just felt this need to get out of here. And now I kind of have to start back from zero again. So having these anchors of that Taurus energy and that Saturn retrograde as well reminds us to play and be grounded. Play, but don't destroy everything just because we need stimulation. Get curious for sure. But then don't be curious at the expense of the old, to think that the bright, shiny new is always better than the old. It's always a balance. They both have their place. So that is probably all I'm going to say for the transits. The moon dates, we just came through our eclipse season, so I hope you're feeling refreshed from that. We have our full moon is in Sagittarius on June 3rd. And then we have our new moon in Gemini on June 17th. So right around when Saturn goes retrograde. So those are our dates. We don't have as many transits this season as we did last one. And now what am I doing? I'm not going to the book yet. I'm grabbing the cards. So we're going to do a little shuffle and pick a card for this season of Gemini and see what's going on. I'll take this moment to acknowledge that I live and work and breathe and play and everything on the traditional and unceded territories of the Lekwungen speaking people here on the west coast of Canada. And I have a massive amount of gratitude towards those peoples who have stewarded the land here for a very long time before we came and kind of stomped all over the stuff. So, oops, there's a card. Oh, that was a few cards that jumped out. So I'm gonna, okay, I'll take the one that was on the top there. All right, card jumped out. We're gonna see how she goes here. This is an interesting one for this season. Let's see. So the card that we have that flew out of the deck with a few others is, how many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I can count. 9 of Swords. So what we have here, we have this figure, this woman. She looks like she's like this stone figure. She's reclining on a bed or something. We have this kind of angel figure here and a bird above. All these swords here and some stripes as well. Curious about this one for Gemini season. Let's see here. Okay. Swords. 9 of Swords. Here we go. A wealth of knowledge. That's nice. 9 swords symbolize a very broad mental horizon. If it becomes dark on the horizon, you will experience a deep personal crisis. The swallow and angel that can be seen on the Ace of Swords stand for the hope of spiritual guidance in difficult and eventful times. As soon as a person starts going their own way, they enter dimensions of being that are uncharted because no one has been there before. Once we redefine our own individuality and comprehend the uniqueness of each and every life, our horizon will shift. Nightmares and nagging thoughts are an integral part of this process. Do not be afraid. Take your time to digest the new state of affairs. Accept doubts and disappointments, but do not succumb to despair. Accept responsibility for your situations. There are new possibilities and new horizons ahead. Go forth and explore them. The time has come to think about your thinking. Reevaluate your ideas from a different perspective. Try to comprehend what your thoughts really mean. Beware of irrational actions and automatic reactions. Do not let yourself be provoked. It is no mere coincidence that the structure and color of this card remind us of the Stars and Stripes, the flag of the United States of America. The land of unlimited opportunity is associated with many conspiracy theories which time and again force the country to confront its own ghosts. This is a unique aspect of the Dali Tarot. Practical advice. Accept responsibility. You will find spiritual guides, see the angel and the swallow, to help you during the transition to a new horizon. Do not be too deterred by temporary obstacles or difficulties. Keep your feet firmly on the ground and reach for the stars. Okay, so this card, Swords, is the suit of air, and Gemini is an air sign, but Swords as a tarot suit is typically often associated with like a bit more tension or kind of difficulty that then forces some sort of action. So this card often kind of feels like, oh no, tough times are coming. Like, you're gonna have to be careful. Be like, don't be scared, but like, take responsibility. There's a storm on the horizon. You can figure it out. But in this context, this card, because it's in Gemini season and we were just talking about like this lightness of spirit, it kind of feels like, difficult times are always happening, actually all the time. We only really like think about them as being traumatic and awful when we are personally in a state of heaviness or fear or despair. Bad things happen all the time, and there's other times when you're so ready to deal with it. You're so rested and resourced. It's kind of the thing of like, I get really, really hangry. So if I'm hungry, like the mildest inconvenience is like the worst thing possible. If I've been fed and like a crisis hits me, I'm like, whatever, I can deal with it. I'm fine. So there's this sense of a lot of the time our perception of an event has way more to do with our inner resources than the event itself. So this might be saying, oh, there might be an event that might be coming at you that might have some difficult times, but your measure of how uncomfortable or difficult it is through your lens. It's not an objective thing that this event will be traumatic. There's an event that's coming that's going to introduce a challenge, and whether you find that to be a horrible, oppressive event or a challenge that allows you to overcome and get to a new kind of space, that's on you, babe. Like that's where you are resourced and how you're viewing things and how you choose to rally, and not just alone, how you choose to bring in support. This card is talking about these spiritual guides as well, to help you out, to say like, this might be challenging, but I'm both willing to face it, and I'm bringing some of that Gemini lightness of like, you know what, things are going to be what they're going to be. We're going to be able to laugh even in the face of adversity. We don't have to take things too seriously. We're just going to kind of move forward. This card really does feel like it's got a lot of elements of that Saturn retrograde in particular, because Saturn often, because it's about kind of brings us limitation and trials to force us into discipline and mastery, often Saturn's lessons come through a difficulty, come through a door shutting, come through, it's that getting fired from your job that seems really awful, but you actually kind of hated your job, and then a new opportunity comes that you were only willing to take because you got fired. So it seemed like it was a bad thing at first, but it forced you into a better situation. That's often how Saturn kind of works, is a calamity comes or a difficulty comes that kind of shakes you out of your comfort zone, and that gives you the opportunity to rally into a new space and a new dimension of success or personal fulfillment. So we're sort of feeling like, okay, Saturn might be coming in, bringing a little bit of a storm here, but not only do we have this kind of like Gemini, like, we're going to deal with it kind of energy, but because Saturn is in Pisces, we have this mention a few times that talks about spiritual guides or having some sort of mentorship. So we were mentioning that if this retrograde is a really good time to lean into your spiritual practices, your meditation, your prayers, your whatever kind of mode that you like to kind of tap into the spiritual realm, that's where you're going to find some guidance. Instead of feeling like, oh, this is really hard and I have to do it all by myself, it's like, this is really hard. Where can I go to find guidance? Okay, where do I go to find my strength? If so much of how I'm going to meet things comes from my inner perception, our spiritual beliefs and our beliefs and our value systems, so much of that is the lens through which we view the world and our situations, and that is kind of strengthened and cleaned out by these spiritual practices. So this really like it's got this very positive kind of, yeah, like this balance. And even at the end where it says keep your feet firmly on the ground and reach for the stars, that kind of feels like what I was talking about, this balance of some Taurus energy still and this sort of Saturn maybe structure sort of stuff coming in, but still this expansion upward of like, it's going to be okay, we've got this Venus in Leo, we're still going to shine, we're going to communicate, we're still moving up and out and into the world in a connected way. And we're also grounded. We know that we have work to do. We know that, maybe we can't just throw everything away for a new adventure, but we do still have to have a little bit of focus. And that sort of strength is, or that kind of, firmly planted but reaching up is a very, I think, very positive situation to be facing kind of anything that comes. You're going to, it's not about being grounded and happy so that bad things never happen to you. It's so that you have this capacity with both confidence and levity to manage and kind of filter through the experiences that we have and hopefully learn from them. So yeah, the only other thing on this card that I was mentioning about was accept responsibility. So this one I'm just highlighting again because Gemini season, responsibility isn't totally Gemini's favorite thing. They're like, no, like let's that's other people's problem, or like, I don't want to stand in one space long enough for responsibility. A lot of the time, it's more so much rather than saying that, oh, Gemini is so irresponsible and doesn't care about things, it's more Gemini doesn't like to be tied down, and responsibility can often feel like an anchor. Like, oh, I'm responsible for these people, so I'm stuck over here. Or, oh, I have these job responsibilities that I have to do, which means I can't just jump away and go on vacation. So it's that Gemini can sort of feel weighed down by responsibility, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's again, it's only if that lens of you feel that responsibilities are limiting you, or rather are boring. A lot of the time it's that feeling is, oh, responsibility is boring, and Gemini wants to be stimulated all the time. If you can find the joy or the purpose or the value in that which you have responsibility for, or that which you're still trying to nurture, which is very much the Saturn way, is what we want to focus on and create and get serious about, we're going to do it best if we fall in love with it. And we're so devoted to it that we just want to keep bettering ourselves, and everything else is a distraction. So Gemini loves distraction. Saturn says fall in love with the project and fall in love with the process of mastery. And so if we can kind of get those together, where Gemini doesn't need new things, they need to be stimulated all the time, and new things are easy. So if you can bring that Gemini need of, I want to be stimulated and engaged, and try to actively choose to fall in love with your work or your task or whatever it is, then it will be engaging. And then if the Gemini needs to go do fun things and kind of like bounce around for a little bit, either it comes back and is grounded in that which it values, or it's like, if you've got one task but there's probably multiple things that you need to do on it, then don't just check off one at a time. Allow the Gemini to do some free reign of like, I'm going to do half of this and this, and get it all kind of done in a kind of bouncy way that's still furthering the goal. There's lots of creative ways that, you can expand and still have stimulation and variety, while being like, as long as all of those things that you're working on are aimed towards a particular goal. So that's kind of what I've got for you with this card and this season. So it feels like, yeah, like I said, there's some opposites here, and opposites can create tension, but they can also bring us into balance. And actually, one thing I didn't mention about Gemini is the signs of the twins, and one of the things that Gemini really works with is duality. So apparent opposites, things that seem contradictory this way and then that way. So Geminis can often get a bad rap for being two-faced, because they're like, I'm like this, and then all of a sudden like this. But what that really is bringing our attention to dualities and the paradox of how opposites, or seeming opposites, they can look like they're so disconnected from each other, but anything that's opposite each other is connected through a concept. So there's some way in which they are connected, they just happen to be opposites. So like if you look at a stick, there's two ends of a stick, they're as far away from each other as they could get, but it's one stick, it's one concept, it's one unifying aspect. There's just polarized ends to it. So Gemini is also this kind of invitation to look at seeming opposites and try to find the connection through them, but being able to kind of play both sides. So this like, oh, I'm over here, I'm this there, I can see both sides of things, and bouncing back between the two is a Gemini strength. And so that can be one way that that we can handle the seeming opposites of wanting freedom and desire, but Saturn being like, no, we got to kind of work over here, and just sort of like finding the union of that. So playing with the paradoxes and dualities of Gemini season is one of my personal favorite things to do, and something that I encourage you to play with as well. So yeah, that's what I've got for you this season. So thank you very much for being here with me and playing my games with me, and indulging my Gemini desire to talk into the airwaves at you. So this is a pay what you can forecast, as they all are, and this season is pay what you can to me. Thank you very much. So all of your donations and support just help me be able to keep going and keep working on these things for you. So the donation link is going to be down in the comments below. I appreciate every and all donations. Thank you so very much. Yeah, so that's Gemini season, and I wish you all lots of fun, and I will see you next season. Ciao.